Yes, it's no surprise then that Afghans globally represent the single largest group of asylum seekers to countries, rich countries like ours. Is it really a good idea to send those desperate people back to Indonesia, tow them back to Indonesia, should they fall into Australian waters?
I'm a bit tough about this, though, to be honest, and I'd like to think I'm a caring and humane person, but I'm a bit tough about this. I mean, we are sending our young soldiers over to Afghanistan to help provide stability and security. The Afghans themselves, with the help of countries like ours, are trying to build security forces, and at the same time there are a lot of people who apparently don't want to participate in any of that and are trying to come illegally to our country via a whole series of other countries on the way. I live near a military base. And I can't help but think our young people are training to go there, and their young people are coming here on boats. So
they're hardly comparable, though, are they? The two?
They are comparable, because I think that Afghans would be best advised to do everything they can to try to support their own country and the establishment of a decent, democratic and perhaps in the long term prosperous society there. And they need people in the Afghan National Army, they need people in the Afghan police. It's often hard to recruit them. So yes, I think that their first priority should be to their country. Now, on the other hand, some people flee. They have to flee. There are circumstances when they flee. They flee next door, don't they? They flee into Pakistan. What happens is people smugglers go into the camps in Pakistan, and they offer them deals. They offer people in those camps deals, and if you've got enough money, and most people don't have, but if you've got enough money, you can pay a people smuggler and they'll fly you to Indonesia, and then they'll try and get you onto a boat and do their best to get you to Australia. I mean, it's a trade, it's a business, and I feel very strongly about this. It's a business that I helped to close down in the early 2000s. It's a business that's been allowed to open up again, and I think it's dangerous, it's costing lives, it's destroying the integrity of our refugee program, and it needs to be closed down. I don't want to see people smugglers making millions of dollars at the expense of the incompetence of Australia.
But Alexander Downer, how does the towback work to Indonesia?
Well, I don't think that is the only solution, and what we did,
but it's a big part of the solution, isn't it? It is a big part.
It is, yeah. Well, big is a big word, but it is a part of it. I think you need to do several things. I definitely think Nauru should be reopened. That worked pretty well. The temporary protection visas worked pretty well. And yes, we did, as a government, tow back. I've honestly not been able to find out any, and I don't recall, but 5 or 6 boats. We towed back a number of boats. What we did was we took them, or the Navy took them, to the 12-mile zone of Indonesia, near an Indonesian port, left them with enough fuel and food to get to that port. On some occasions, I rang the Indonesian foreign minister to tell him what we had done, and he presumably put in place various measures to deal with those people when they arrived there. We didn't ask the Indonesians, but the Indonesians knew this was a big issue for us.
Now, you've said before that the tow-back scheme worked, but I guess it sort of depends on what you define as worked, because, yes, they didn't make it to Australia, but in at least 5 instances, people that we know of at least didn't make it to Indonesia either because they died at sea. It's hardly something that you'd classify as a terrific policy.
Somebody told me 800 people have now died at sea. I don't know if that figure's right, but 800 people have died at sea trying to get to Australia. But the consequence of the policy change has been to open up this whole grisly trade again, and that is what is risking lives. Now, we towed back very few boats because there are lots of reasons why that's fairly difficult to do, but it can be done, and it was. But the point I make about it is it sent a decisive message to the people smugglers that your business is not going to happen and we won't tolerate it.
You would accept that part of that message was that there is a chance that you'll die being towed back to Indonesia.
But how many people have died without towing them back to Indonesia. I mean,
it doesn't have to be one or the other, though. It doesn't have to be one or the other. If people are processed, in Malaysia or Nauru, they're not necessarily going to be dying at sea, are they?
But the circumstances that lead them to be transferred to an offshore processing centre are that their boats would be intercepted, presumably. I mean, so ipso facto, they're still going to be heading off on boats. The challenge here is not to get into some sort of ghastly debate about who would prefer people to die. No one wants anyone to die. But for me, I am one of those people who thinks that if there is something bad happening, you have to stop it. And I would move heaven and earth to stop this trade just as we did. Sure, we put up with enormous political opposition, abuse, denigration, very hurtful cartoons, claims that we were killers and we hated refugees, we were racists, and we had all of this thrown at us, vile things that were said. As far as the likes of John Howard and I were concerned, that was absolutely fine as long as we closed down this trade and we had a normal, regular refugee system in Australia. We would take refugees, we'd look after them, we'd be kind to them, but we wouldn't allow people smugglers to make millions of dollars and, of course, risk people's lives, more than risk people's lives, cost people their lives. No, you have to be ruthless in closing this trade down. I think that is not inhumane. I think that is caring and humane to do that.
And just